Servus Freunde, mein Name ist Jimmy Cage. Buddymeister?
No more Buddymeister.
No more Buddymeister?
I've had enough of this. Enough of you and your constant harassment. You know that I was born for more than this, don't you?
What are you even talking about?
What I'm talking about? I am the Chola Meister!
Oh, look at that cute pussycat.
I'm the Buddymeister. I'm the Buddymeister.
Servus Freunde, my name is Jimmy Cage.
And I'm Deniz, the Buddymeister.
We have reviewed more than 400 indie movies on the channel, and once a month we let all of our awesome patrons and YouTube members decide which movie we should watch next. And as we expected, we got a pretty clear winner this time around.
The next poll is already up as well, and in February our supporters can vote on 3 early Shah Rukh Khan movies.
Anjam, Bazigar and Deewana.
Aayirathil Oruvan is a 2010 Tamil language action-adventure that was written and directed by Selvaraghavan. It stars Karthi, Rima Sen, Andrea Jeremiah and Parthiban, and it's our second Selvaraghavan movie. We watched and we very much liked Pudupetai.
The title, Aayirathil Oruvan, which translates to One in 1,000 Men, is taken from the 1965 classic action-adventure of the same name. It also features an adaptation and direct homage to one of that movie's songs, which was a cool but also quite bizarre sequence.
The premise of this movie is quite simple. It of course branches out and becomes something different, especially in the second half, but in general it's about 3 characters, Muthu, Lavanya and Anita, who embark on an adventure to search for a missing archaeologist. That story is entwined with a story about a lost Chola prince, who once escaped from the Pandyas and is now in hiding.
Aayirathil Oruvan is a movie that has been suggested to us probably ever since we really started getting into Indian cinema, and it also almost always comes with the warning that it might be quite difficult to understand. I have read several times from people who describe it as a flawed masterpiece, and now that I have seen the movie, I get what they mean. It's a wild film with so much ambition.
People have also mentioned that we should read a little bit about it so that we won't get lost. But honestly, I don't think there's so much that's not understandable or even impenetrable. Maybe it's also because we have seen quite a lot of Indian movies by now, and maybe also because the Cholas versus Pandyas subject matter is at least not unknown to us anymore, ever since we have read part of Kalki's epic Ponniyin Selvan and watched Mani Ratnam's adaptation, of course.
I mean, I'm certain there were elements, cultural aspects and references in Aayirathil Oruvan that went over our heads, but I don't think not getting the movie was really an issue here. That being said, people want us to be honest, and honestly, I totally see the ambition and the different nature of this huge project, but the execution and how the film finally shaped up was really lacking for me. There are so many parts of it that I loved or liked, where I couldn't believe how outrageous and awesome it was, but all in all, this is kind of a big train wreck for me.
Boy, this is going to be an interesting discussion. This is one of those movies where I totally get all the criticism, but I actually liked it. It fascinated me. It is kind of a train wreck, but there is also a lot of stuff in there that's just fantastic and masterful. And I think it also worked for me because I let myself fall into it. I tried to switch off my mind, my thinking, as best as I could, and try to let it just wash over me. So we'll probably think or maybe even say the same things about the movie, but with different outcomes.
I have read that the film has been in development hell for quite some time. There were problems during the shoot, really extensive pre- and post-production works, and it was postponed several times. But even before I have read that, several times throughout watching the movie, I felt as if this was something that has been in huge troubles and that was somehow put together with the stuff they had filmed later. But for a film that should have probably come out differently.
In the history of cinema, there have been countless movies that had a very difficult production, and most of the time they didn't really come together that great in the end. I mean, there are exceptions like Gladiator or Apocalypse Now, and of course, There are different increments of a troubled production and how the final product gets released. Sometimes you can sense that something was troubled or went wrong. Sometimes, and that's the best case, you don't notice anything at all.
Aayirathil Oruvan reminds me of films like David Lynch's Dune or Michael Cimino's Heaven's Gate. These hugely ambitious projects that just don't come together in the end. They are all very fascinating, and Aayirathil Oruvan is certainly a fascinating film. I totally get that this has become kind of a cult classic over the years. There's a lot in it. And it's extreme and bold in many regards, and for that alone I was happy that I finally watched it. But man, was this exhausting and frustrating.
For me, this started as a full-blown adventure movie with all the right trademarks and story beats that you need for it. There is the goal of finding the missing archaeologist. We know that the people who traveled in those realms before never made it back alive. We learn something about traps and spells and magic, and we get a smug and arrogant character like Karthi's Mutu. So for me, everything was set for old school adventuring.
You know, I get that, and I think the premise is totally alright, but the filmmaking is so busy a lot of times, with so many different elements and techniques coupled up together. Split screens, strange transitions, just a lot of digital trickery in general. For me, this was really a hot mess. The cool adventure gets totally sidelined by that. In general, I don't mind if the filmmaking and storytelling tend to be on the crazier side of things, but it must somehow fit together and fit the material. And I think in this case it really clashes. It gets slightly better in the stronger second half, but this wasn't just rough around the edges, it felt almost unwatchable sometimes.
It actually is. There are some terrible scenes in this movie. I never wanted to turn it off though. It's kind of caught between being totally stupid and totally cool. It somehow put a spell on me, no matter how terrible it looked or how terrible it was cut. I don't know. It somehow grabbed me with this expedition vibe, the different environments, and of course with that second half that's just pure cinematic joy at times.
I can tell you the things that I really enjoyed, and I think we will agree on most or even all of them. I think the second half is doing some really wild and awesome stuff. It reminded me of movies like Mad Max or Apocalypto. This super dark, mysterious, ancient feeling world that our protagonists finally arrive at. The sets, the makeup, the extreme nature of it all.
Exactly!
But we still have to get to that point first. Anyway, we also have Parthiban, himself a pretty wild filmmaker and of course actor, as the king of the Chola Dynasty. He gives a really strong and memorable performance, and he's really kind of a tragic figure. The whole segment where he and Rima Sen's character are interacting is really something else.
I loved Parthiban. I loved him in Ponniyin Selvan and I loved him here. His raw power, the fear that he spreads, but also the longing for his forgotten and lost empire. It's great. And almost everything with him and his empire and the caves, a fantastic setting, is awesome. And the song Tindra Mane is like 10 out of 10 for me.
It's a really great song.
And you know, I think Parthiban has good chemistry with Rima Sen. And also the chemistry between Karthi, Rima Sen and Andrea Jeremiah is quite alright. They have some fun scenes together.
Well, Karthi is quite strong in the movie, or at least his performance feels alive and energetic and wild and therefore interesting to watch. Something that I really can say about Rima Sen and Andrea Jeremiah. I mean, Rima Sen gets pretty awesome in the second half, before she kind of vanishes in the finale. But in the first half, these two women, more than anything else, annoyed me. And it's certainly also a matter of the direction and the screenplay. For the longest time, the first half appeared to me like most actors were completely lost and had no idea what kind of movie they were making. And this might be a nitpick, but it drove me nuts how Rima Sen's and Alagan Perumal's characters looked absolutely ridiculous firing their weapons. It was just bizarre, without aiming, looking like gangsters. It was so difficult to grasp what the movie was going for when it comes to tone and atmosphere. It's super dark and violent, but so much of it also comes across as absolutely ridiculous.
I agree. The shooting is ridiculous. And to be honest, when I think about the movie now, I mostly think about all the great stuff in the second half. Of course, there's some of that shooting as well. We get some real fun machine guns versus swords and arrows action.
Fun.
But when the movie's good, it's really good.
I have so much more to say, but something positive first. It was refreshing in light of many other Indian movies how little dialogue there is in Aayirathil Oruvan, especially in the second half. I'm not even sure if Karthi is really having much dialogue at all for the last hour. It was so much about the visuals and the atmosphere, and I really liked it.
Yeah, I mean...
Unfortunately though, that atmosphere gets destroyed time and time again by this really crazy mishmash of styles and techniques. I can tolerate and excuse a lot of cheaper looking effects, especially in a movie with a restrained budget. But some of the things here just look terrible and completely take you out of the movie. Like those copy and paste helicopters and paratroopers, or this overlong segment with the traps in the sand. It took forever and it looks like a bad video game.
Yeah, I can only repeat myself. I get all that. I had no idea about this movie whatsoever. The only thing I knew is that it was directed by the guy who did Puro Petai. And like I said earlier, I turned my head off as I watched it. No expectations, no, oh my god, these effects look terrible, no anything. Maybe I was kind of challenging myself a little. And you know, it kind of worked. I was thoroughly entertained by this decent train wreck of a movie and didn't mind how bad a lot of the stuff was. Now I know the other side, I've been there. If something doesn't add up in a movie and you get bored or annoyed, you automatically become more sensitive to everything else.
I can excuse stuff like that if the rest really delivers, but for me, Aayirathil Oruvan was a really baffling experience. Like I said, the second half was much stronger, and towards the very end, I finally got the feeling that the movie was actually about something. I'm not sure if I got the intended message, not that it's super important if it was the correct message, it's more important that you are able to engage with a piece of art. But what I took away from it is the absurdity and stupidity of this never-ending bloodshed and revenge stuff. The movie turns into this slaughter and it's depicted so extreme that I can't lie, it had an effect on me. It reminded me a little bit of movies like The Thin Red Line, that really shows you how gruesome and horrible human beings can be to each other.
See? So the thing...
Unfortunately though, I was still having a hard time buying into the reality of the movie and taking this seriously, because I couldn't shake the feeling that a lot of it is just silly. I mean, armed soldiers with machine guns versus people with swords and catapults. More than once I was wondering why the soldiers just didn't throw some grenades at them. And it was even worse when they finally do, because then I was wondering why they didn't do that before. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. I guess you just have to accept the supernatural nature of it all, but that shouldn't mean that the movie itself shouldn't follow some kind of inner logic. But how this Chola Dynasty prevailed, it's just also difficult to accept?
Difficult? Probably. But come on, this is a movie, an extreme one. Why ask all these questions? I mean, I didn't love the movie as a whole. I loved parts of it though, and I wish that the production wouldn't have been as troubled as it was. And I could only guess what would have been possible if they had a bigger budget, and that's something that bugs me. But what can I say? I'm kind of surprised myself. I like the sword fighting, I like the fun scene where Lavanya and Anita are cold and have to cuddle with Muthu, also the stuff where they are possessed and completely out of their minds. I thought the ridiculous arena fighting with the boulder was fun, everything with the Chola King is awesome anyway, the rain, the atmosphere...
I don't know. Of course, some of these things are fine, but so many times it just felt as if they just cobbled together the stuff they managed to film. The whole reveal of Rima Sen's character is told in this strange voiceover narration. The movie should have laid down the motivations of these characters much earlier, and as much as I was into this wild and archaic mythological stuff in the second half, I felt the character work was really missing. In the end, it felt neither like the tale of Karthi's character, nor that of Rima Sen's, and especially not that of Andrea Jeremiah's.
Well, Muthu does have some kind of arc. I mean, I agree, all of these characters should have been fleshed out more, and the way it's presented here is pretty superficial. But I thought that we could have guessed something's off with Anita by the way she played with Muthu, and he becomes a totally different character in the end. And I like that too. Everything becomes so mythical and spiritual.
For me, the movie gets points for ambition, boldness, and some of the performances, and some of its atmosphere and action and craziness.
Hey, that's 6 aspects you liked.
But on the other side are some of the other performances. The weak script or the weak execution of the story, baffling direction and ridiculous choices. So yeah, it's a pretty hot mess for me. When it clicks, I love the extreme nature of it, but more often than not, I was shaking my head.
Okay, fair enough. So how are we going to do the...
You know what? You do it. What would you say in German about Aayirathil Oruvan?
Aayirathil Oruvan ist ein ziemlich wüstes Durcheinander, das einen mehr als einmal zum Kopfschütteln bringt. Aber wenn man sich darauf einlässt oder einlassen kann, findet man in diesem Durcheinander einige wirklich wunderbare Dinge.
I give Aayirathil Oruvan 5 out of 10. It's more like 5.2, but I don't do that.
For me, it's 7 out of 10. It's more like 7.1, but I don't do that either. Did you know that it is not really known where Raja Chola, aka Raja the Great, was buried? There are two major theories. One says he's buried in Otatupu in Udayalur. The other says he's buried beneath the Kailasanathar temple in Udayalur.
Did not know that. Good trivia, buddy. So, what are your thoughts about Aayirathil Oruvan? Leave a comment. You can hit me up on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, and also on Patreon, simply at @thejimmycage.
And you can hit me up on Twitter at the Buddymeister.
And if you enjoyed this episode, please give us a thumbs up, share, subscribe, whatever you like.
And make sure you hit that bell for all we have to tell.